The Penrose family moved in quietly and vanished. Just as quietly, no crime scene, no remains. Just a sealed house and a locked nursery no one could open. Every family since has left a journal. None of them finished it. That's how it begins before the house is ever mentioned. A ring, half wild and too symmetrical, in the woods north of Otter Lake, where birds never seem to perch. The soil there smells metallic, even in spring. And something about the wind, when it passes over that hill, sounds almost hollowed. There are no photos of the house being built, no blueprints, no contractor records, no supply receipts. Only a single land transfer, dated March 14th, 1904, between a silent seller and a man named Elias Penrose, newly married, recently widowed, and wealthy enough to afford secrets. Neighbors, what few there were, said the estate just appeared. They didn't mean overnight. They meant it was never noticed, as if the trees around it had grown sideways, forming walls. As if the path from the road had always been carved in that curve. As if the shape of the house had already existed, waiting to be revealed. This structure was strange, symmetrical at first glance, but every window sat off its center. Every roof-line bed subtly inward. Even the chimneys smoked in silence. No scent, no sound. No one remembered seeing construction carts or stone deliveries, but they all remembered the white paint, not fresh, not peeled, just dry, almost powdered, as if it had been exposed to heat no one witnessed. The Penrose family did not host guests. Elias lived there with his sister Margaret and her son Joseph. No other names appear in census documents, only staff entries with no surnames and notations. Marked domestic. They were never seen in town. The only proof they existed at all came from the postmaster, who swore to have delivered sealed packages to the iron gate once a week, never taken by hand, always left beside the lantern one time. He claimed it wasn't there when he returned, but something else was. A cross, nailed into the earth, made from bundled sticks, facing downward. The townspeople began calling it the house that waited, because no one ever saw it move. But somehow it always felt closer. Elias Penrose was known, distantly, for his dealings in land trades and obscure legal holdings across several states. But after 1906, all public activity ceased, and yet the family stayed. The home was large, enough to hold 20, but no lights were ever seen in more than 3 windows, always on the second floor, always after midnight, flickering, but never moving. In 1910, a man named Charles Goodwin, a city assessor, filed a report with the local tax office. He claimed the Penrose property lacked coherent boundaries, that fence lines had shifted between visits, that the structure's interior scale did not match its visible footprint. He was reassigned and later institutionalized, but not before leaving a note in the margin of his final ledger. There are more rooms going in than coming out. By 1915, rumors had spread far enough that no one approached the estate, not even hunters. Children were warned never to follow the creek past the black sycamore tree, and even birds, it was said, flew around the property's edge. Then the doors began showing up, not in the house, in the woods. Plain wood doors, nailed into trees or embedded in rock, always with a brass handle. Never locked. Got one boy opened one. He was missing for 3 days. When he came back, he didn't speak. He only carried a linen napkin, folded 6 times, with a name stitched inside it. Penrose. The house was still standing unchanged, but something wasn't right. In 1920, a visiting scholar from Albany, Dr. Warren Mallon, was invited to the estate by Elias himself, in what would become the only written invitation to leave the house. The letter read, "Come before dusk. We've made a new rule." Dr. Mallon never arrived, but his driver did. He returned with a single sentence, "There are more stairs now." The car was found abandoned a week later, just past the tree line. All 4 doors open. No footprints. Inside the glove box, a small child's shoe dot wrapped in a page torn from the Old Testament. Exodus 12:30, and there was was not a house where there was not one dead. The Penroses were never heard from again. By 1922, a bank attempted to reclaim the property. They couldn't. The deed remained active, taxes paid annually from an untraceable trust. But the house had changed. Its southern wing had grown longer. Windows that once faced west now opened onto interior corridors. A gardener sent to photograph the front drive described the structure as curling inward. His camera malfunctioned. The film, when developed, showed a house that didn't exist. Stories taller, with no doors. He refused to return, but left behind a sketch. Rough, ink, smudged. Shaking hands. At the top of the page. A note. It sees itself. Over the decades, the structure fell out of local memory. Maps removed the road. Postal deliveries ceased. And the land, though still technically owned, was left untouched. But the trees didn't grow over it, and the house never rotted. In 1979, satellite imaging caught an anomaly, an irregularity in elevation where the house should be. When surveyed, the photos showed no building, no shadows, only an oval clearing with 12 faint depressions in the soil, like the memory of a foundation, and something else. A 13th mark, smaller, sharper, the shape of a door frame, facing east. It was never explained. And no further images were released. Then, in 1991, hikers claimed to hear something, a sound like hinges. Opening far off underneath, but when they approached the clearing, there it was, the Penrose House. Clean, undisturbed, with the gate slightly ajar. They didn't enter, but they didn't leave right away either. Instead, one of them, Aaron Bell, placed his hand on the gate. He said it felt warm. And something moved behind the curtain. In the second window, they turned back immediately. Aaron never returned to that part of the state. He later reported having dreams. Always the same. A corridor with many corners, and a voice calling from inside the walls. Not screaming, just repeating. There are more doors than you remember. The property has never sold, and every attempt to list it on record or unofficially has failed. Some say it's because there are no coordinates. Others say the house chooses who can find it because it was never meant to be discovered. Only remembered. And only by those willing to forget everything else, including how they go. Inside, certainly. Below is the fully expanded cinematic horror script segment 4, Chapter 2, Communal and True Blood Total Word Count, 1,250 total in structure. Liturgy of Fear documentary narration. The west corner of the Penrose House was always colder than the west. Even in summer, it kept a strange chill-like wind had passed through it too many times and taken something with it. The paint along its trim never held. The plaster beneath, when exposed, carried a faint pink hue, not quite rust, not quite dust, but no one spoke of it. Not until the her name, according to payroll fragments, was misset. No surname, no origin. Hired in 1911 to tend the second floor parlors and keep linen in the east bedrooms pressed and rotated. She was 16. 3 weeks into her employment, she was found face in the west hall, unconscious, shaking, both of her palms torn, opened. The skin flayed as if scraped against unworked stone. No cuts, no punctures, no glass, just the raw imprint of resistance, as if she tried to stop herself from being pulled, and failed. The housekeeper, a woman named Dahlia, claimed she found her after midnight, slumped just outside the last door on the left. A door, she insisted, that hadn't been there the night before, but something wasn't right. There were no bruises on Lisette's body, none on her shoulders, none along her spine, no marks of restraint or force. Just the hands. The doctor, a German man who refused to write his name on the certificate, suggested she had fallen, that perhaps she'd stumbled down the narrow corridor in the dark. But the lanterns were lit, the floor was dry, and she was found beside a door that opened into nothing. An empty room. No furnishings, no dust, only a a square of flooring that sounded hollow and stepped on. She awoke 2 days later and began to speak. She said she had been cleaning near the corridor's end when she felt something behind her. Not footsteps, not air, just the presence of wrongness, a pressure against the skin, like someone was standing too close without ever. Touching Dot, she turned, but nothing was there. She kept walking, 3 steps forward, 1 turn to the left. The hallway extended farther than it had earlier that day. She remembered thinking, there shouldn't be a window here, but there was. A tall, narrow window with no glass dot, and beyond it, a blackness that didn't look like night. It was ... thick, absorbing, the kind of black that made your eyes feel wet. She reached out, and that's when she was pushed, not from behind, but from every direction at once. As if the walls had leaned inward, not collapsing. Just folding. She couldn't scream. She didn't even fall. She said it felt like the house pressed her through its own skin until the room around her snapped back open, and she was on the floor. Again got bleeding. But the most disturbing part wasn't the injury. It was what she said. Next, Lisette claimed that while pressed inside that space, while trapped in the pressure of the room, she could hear voices. Faint. Praying. Repeating the same line over and over again. It isn't yours. It isn't yours. It isn't yours. No one knew what she meant, and when asked, days later, to explain what it was, she left. Once, quietly, and refused to speak again. She was removed from service, taken to her uncle's home in Ellenville, where she reportedly never entered a building with more than 2 rooms again. But that door, it remained. No one had remembered seeing it before that night. And yet, there it was, a smooth wooden frame, brass knob, set slightly lower than the others in the house. It didn't lock, and after Lisette's departure, it wouldn't close all the way. As if the hinge had shifted, or the house itself refused to hold it shut. In 1913, another servant reported hearing a rhythmic tapping behind that door. Every Thursday night, just after 2 a.m. She claimed it sounded like fingers, knocking not on the door, but under the floor. Room was inspected. Again, it was empty. But now the hollow sound had deepened, more resonant, as if a void had widened beneath the boards. No one wanted to enter. The door was nailed shut, a simple act. 4 iron nails, crosswise in a lattice. But the next morning, it was open again. Not broken. Just open. No signs of the nails. As if they'd been removed carefully, one by one, and taken away. The housekeeper left without notice. Her ledger simply stops, and the name list is written one last time, underlined once, with no annotation. Later that year, a priest was brought in from Albany, not for an exorcism, but to bless the house. He was not told the full mystery, only that strange occurrences had unsettled the staff. He did not complete the blessing. According to the gardener, who stood watch outside, the priest entered the west corridor and exited 7 minutes later. Pale, sweating, saying only, "It will not accept peace." He left behind his prayer book. Inside, 1 page had been torn out. Psalm 91, "He shall cover thee with his feathers, and under his wings shalt thou trust." The passage had been replaced. In its place, a hand. Drawn sketch. A line, but inverted, positioned inside what looked like a doorway. No one knows who drew it, but the paper was stained in the corners with blood. To this day, no documentation explains the wound Lisette suffered. No one understands why her palms alone bore the damage. Some believe it was psychosomatic, trauma manifesting in the most symbolic part of her body, the part that resisted, that reached. But others believe she touched something the house hadn't meant for her to feel, a wall that was never meant to be walked beside, a door that only opens when you don't want it to, and a room that doesn't hold objects. Only memory. The room behind that door has since been sealed again, not by nails, but by neglect. The corridor beyond it no longer appears on the floor plan, it was never on the blueprint, because no since still avoid that corner. They say the paint dries slower there, that objects move through the space arrive colder, and that sometimes, very late at night, they hear something breathing, not fast, not loud. Just close, and always behind them. Certainly. Below is the fully expanded cinematic horror script segment for Chapter 3, The Locked Nursery Target. Word count, approximately 1,250 tone in structure. Liturgy of Fear documentary narration at the top of the Penrose. Staircase past the landing, where the portraits of unnamed ancestors hung just a little too low. There was a door with no handle. It stood flush with the wall, nearly invisible, unless the light caught the paint just right. A faded white panel, interrupted only by a thin bronze seam where a keyhole should have been. But there was no lock, no hinges, no molding. Just warmth, even in January, even during storms that iced over the estate's east windows. The door remained warm to the touch. As though someone on the other side had been breathing against it for hours. They called it the nursery, but there were no children in the Penrose family. Not then, not ever. No birth certificates, no bassinets, number, toys found stored in trunks. And yet, sometimes after dusk, the staff would hear lullabies. Soft, humming, always in a minor key. They came not from behind the door, but from within the wood itself. Like the timber still remembered the song. Or like something inside was humming directly through the grain. It began in 1907 when Mrs. Penrose's sister, a woman named Marian Blackthorne, stayed for the winter. She was widowed, frail, and according to her letters, troubled by dreams. But her second night in the house, she wrote something else. A child was outside my room last night. She tapped once, twice, then stopped. I opened the door. There was no one there, but I could still hear her breathing. The next morning, Marian asked to be moved to the downstairs suite. She did not explain why, but later, a chambermaid reported that Marian refused to walk. Past the third step from the top. She would pause there. Turn pale, and descend backwards, as if afraid something would follow. No one else had yet heard the lullaby. Not until 1910. A tutor was hired for the Penrose's niece, though curiously, no name was ever recorded for the child herself. Just the tutor, a man named Alcott Gray. He stayed in the south wing, and within 2 weeks, he had submitted a formal request to be moved. He stated that every night, at precisely 9:03 p.m., he heard humming from the nursery, even when the corridor was empty, even when no one else was upstairs. He described it as faint, almost maternal, but never quite human. It does not breathe between notes, he wrote, and it ends mid-phrase, as though something is listening. He left the house 3 nights later, without collecting his pay. The cook said she saw him, walking out into the orchard barefoot, his suitcase dragging behind him. Open. He never returned. The Penroses dismissed it. They said Mr. Gray had suffered nervous sensitivities, that some men simply weren't suited for old houses. But then came the scratching. A maid, Margaret, age 17, reported that when she passed the door just before bed, she could hear something moving behind it. Not footsteps, not voices. Just the steady, rhythmic scratch of fingernails. As if a child were tracing letters into the door from inside. She placed her hand on the wood. It pulsed. Warm. Thick. Almost as if it were alive. She didn't sleep that night. Nor the one after. On the third morning, she fainted while drawing bathwater. When she came to, she whispered one phrase again and again. There's no floor in there. There's no floor in there. No one knew what she meant. The nursery door had never been opened. No key had ever been found. But one house guest claimed drunkenly at a holiday party that he'd seen the door ajar. Just once. He said he'd gone upstairs to fetch a coat. Corridor was empty, the light low, and the door, normally flush and mute, was standing open just an inch. Inside, he swore he saw walking not a chair, just the motion, back and fourth dot, as if something invisible were gently swimming. He did not investigate, but when he returned downstairs, the shoulder of his coat was damp. He assumed compensation, until he saw the streaks dot 5 lines dot tiny, parallel dot as if a hand far too. Small had gripped him just long enough to leave a mark. He never spoke of it again, but he never returned to Penrose House dot, and others soon followed. A seamstress refused to walk in the upstairs bedrooms. Bailey swore he'd heard crying behind the walls. One mother even claimed to have seen toys arranged on the upper stair wooden blocks, spelling out a name that no one recognized. Cecilia. But the Penroses had no daughters, got no nieces, got no children. At all dot, when asked why the nursery was built, Mr. Penrose reportedly smiled and said nothing. Later, when questioned again, he denied it existed, denied that the room had ever had a door, denied that the second floor, blueprints, which had once shown the space clearly labeled Cradle Wing, had ever existed, but copies were found, filed under a different surname, Penrose, with 2 N's. Likely an error, or perhaps not. Those plans showed a small hexagonal room at the end of the upper hall. No windows, just a single circular depression in the center, roughly the size of a cradle's base. The blueprints were dated 1896.8 years, before the house was said to be built. But something wasn't right. The house had never been altered. Never renovated. And yet the nursery remained invisible in every official record. Every census. Every inspection, except noon. In 1921, a tax assessor included a line. Item marked Warren Anomaly North Quadrant. No explanation. No fee. Just a single notation. The assessor died the following spring. He was found seated at his desk. Eyes closed, head tilted back. His mouth was filled with linen, rolled into a small, soft plug. As if placed there, gently, like one would silence a child. Back at the Penrose House, the nursery remains undisturbed. No one has entered. No one has claimed to hold the key, but staff still report hearing lullabies. Soft. Hollow. And never quite in tune. And those who dare touch the door say it still feels warm, but not like heat, not like fire, like breath held too long in a space that should have been silent. Of course, here's the full cinematic horror script for Chapter 4, The Mirror That Refused Reflection, written in the exact tone, structure, and pacing of Liturgy of Fear. Approx. 1,250 words. There is a room on the ground floor of the Penrose House where light falls strangely. Not dim, not dark, but thick. The parlor receives morning sun through tall lace curtains, the kind once bleached by hand, then tacked in place so tightly the nails disappeared into the wood. There's a chandelier in the center of the room, unused, and against the far wall, framed in warped oak and green velvet backing, a mirror, nearly 5 feet tall, slightly bowed, the kind meant to catch the elegance of long skirts, gloved hands, and laughter. But no one laughed in that room, not for very long. The mirror had been in the house since at least 1912, but there is no record of where it came from. No maker's mark, no receipt, no initials etched along the backing. The servants refused to clean it. They said no matter how many times they wiped the surface, dust would gather again by the hour, and not on the glass. Inside it. By 1915, the Penroses began keeping the parlor door shut, but guests still wandered in. One, a distant cousin from Montreal, wrote that he had caught his reflection while adjusting his cuffs, and then didn't see it again. The room was there, the fireplace, the rug, even the candelabra behind me, but I was gone. Just shadow, shape, no face. He laughed it off. At first. Until the second night, he returned, alone after midnight. He was heard walking, seen passing through the lower hall, but he did not come out. Not until dawn. They found him seated in the parlor chair, facing the mirror, his eyes red, his hands raw, and he said only this: "It doesn't blink." When twice a week. The velvet would fall. No breeze, no draft, no explanation. And once it was exposed, it showed the room behind it clearly. Perfectly. Every chair, every picture frame, every shifting glint of brass or copper, but never the person standing in front of it. Only their own line, their shadow. As though the mirror showed a room already abandoned, already left behind. It became a game, briefly. Curiosity among the house's more brazen guests. One man, an art critic from Philadelphia, stood before it for 17 minutes. When asked later what he saw, he said, "My shape, my form, but the longer I looked, the more it moved. It didn't match me." He drew a sketch later that night. The figure was bent, not distorted, like a carnival glass, but sagging as though it were leaning forward to listen. That same night, he woke screaming, not from a nightmare, but because he couldn't close his eyes. They remained open, unblinking, his pupils dilated, so wide that the irises nearly vanished. He clawed at his temples, and when the physician arrived, he said only, "It's still looking." The mirror was moved after that. Dragged to the opposite wall and covered in linen. Furniture was stacked in front, but it didn't help. House staff claimed that their reflections still failed in other glass silver trays, window panes, even the water in a wash basin. It was never complete, never clear. As though the mirror had stolen. The act of seeing itself. In 1929, a photographer visiting the estate attempted to take a portrait of the family in the parlor. The camera worked. The flash went off, but when the plate was developed, there were no faces, not blurred, not scratched, just blank ovals where the heads should be. As if they had never existed at all. And behind them, centered in the frame, the mirror. Raped. Showing. No one. The photographer refused to return, and the Penrose matriarch ordered the mirror removed, but the movers couldn't lift it. 2 men tried, then 4. And then 6. They checked the wall for bolts, checked the floor for glue. There was nothing. Mirror refused to move, like it had sunk into the foundation, or like it no longer belonged to the room at all. One man later claimed that when he touched it, he felt heat. Not from the surface. From behind it. As though something were breathing against the glass. He said it pulsed. Just once, like a hand pressing. Back. No one entered the parlor after that. The doors were nailed shut, and the wallpaper slowly yellowed in strips. But guests still spoke of it, not of what they saw, but what they didn't. A missing shadow on the wall, a face that failed to appear, in a window reflection. And once a child, staying with the housekeeper's sister, looked up while brushing her hair, and froze. She dropped the brush, turned to her aunt. And said, "There's a hole in my eyes." She never explained, but for the next 6 months, she refused to look in any mirror. And years later, when she married, she requested the bedroom mirror be removed from her home. She died in 1983. Her daughter said she would never sleep in a room with glass. Not even windows. And that she often whispered at night, facing the walls, one phrase again and again: "I don't know what's behind me." Today, the Penrose mirror still remains. Covered. But even through the cloth, guests report unease, a sense of weight behind the frame, like something watching from the wrong side. And when the curtains shift, when the morning light catches the corner of glass beneath the fabric, no one stays in the room, not for long, because the mirror still shows. The room behind. Still shows the chairs, the walls, the fireplace, but never the person standing in front of it, only a shadow, waiting to move on its own. Of course, here's the full cinematic horror script for Chapter 5, The Man in the Suit Who Visited Twice, written in the exact tone, structure, and psychological pacing of Liturgy of Fear. Approx. 1,250 words. The records show he arrived at 10:42 a.m. Black, Chrysler Plymouth, 2 dents in the rear bumper, the tires still damp from the county road. The man stepped out slowly, wool slacks, buttoned coat, thin leather gloves that creaked faintly when he adjusted adjusted his briefcase. He paused at the edge of the Penrose gate, not to admire the house, but as if he was listening to it. The wind that morning was cold, sharp, but he did not shiver. According to the log kept by the groundsman, he introduced himself as a federal inspector with the Historical Conservation Office, an office that did not officially exist. His badge was clean, his tone clipped and efficient. This visit will be brief. No one questioned it. The man walked the grounds silently. No notepad, no camera dot. He did not ask questions. He did not comment on the home's age, structure, or materials. But at one point, he stopped in front of the library's north facing window and stared. 14 minutes. Motionless. The groundsman, watching from a distance, said he looked as though he were waiting for something to blink. He did not go inside the house, not by 12:03. He was going, no signature. No explanation, just the sound of gravel under tires, and the echo of a car door closing. But something wasn't right, because 1 week later, he returned, same time, same car, but a different name. He introduced himself again, this time as Arthur R. Bennington, representing the National Bureau of Historical Protection, another office that did not exist. The groundsman said the badge was identical, same shape, same font, but the photo was different. Same man, but the face looked off. The jaw seemed longer, the eyes wider, the hairline subtly receded. He was smiling in the photo, but the corners of his mouth were tight, pulled back as if they had been taught to smile, but didn't remember why. This time, he entered the house. He asked to see the basement, then the upper hallway, then the locked nursery. The Penroses weren't home, but the staff let him in, because they said he spoke with a voice that felt approved. Not comforting, not authoritative. Just final. He carried a black book, unmarked, and every room he entered, he paused as though counting something in the walls. He tapped the molding, measured the gaps between floorboards with his eyes, and when he reached the parlor, he stood in front of the draped mirror for nearly 20 minutes. Didn't touch it, didn't speak, but according to the housemaid who watched from the hall, he mouthed something again and again, 3 syllables. Is it was and then abruptly he left. But this time he signed the logbook. Different name, different handwriting, but the ink from his pen left no impression on the page, just color, no depth. The name faded within 2 days. Completely. The staff grew uneasy. They searched for his card, his signature, even tire tracks in the drive. Nothing remained, not even the indentations from the heels of his shoes. But the worst part was the photograph. A security camera had been installed above the front entrance 2 years prior. Old reel, manual film. But reliable. The footage from the second visit showed the door open. It showed the wind stir the curtain. It showed the light bend across the floor, but it did not show anyone enter. No man, no shadow, no outline. Just emptiness. As though the house had opened itself for something that had already been there. The following week, 3 members of the Penrose staff quit. No explanation, no letter, no forwarding address. One sent a parcel before she vanished. Inside was a single page, a photocopy of the man's first badge. The name read E.R. Kincaid, but in handwritten ink below it, a note. Look again. It's your name now. The paper was burned. The groundsman, the only remaining witness to both visits, began sleeping in his car. He refused to go near the house after dark, refused to use mirrors, refused to speak above a whisper, and when pressed, he simply repeated a single line. He saw something inside himself. That winter, the Penroses returned from France. They were told about the inspector. They denied ever requesting federal review, denied knowing any Kincaid or Bennington. They ordered the registry log destroyed, but it was already blank. The pages between 1932 and 1934 had dissolved, not torn, not removed, just faded, like the paper had exhaled. and let go. In 1941, another inspector came this one real and filed his report. He noted unusual floor plans, contradictions in stairwells, a room on the second floor that measured wider inside than out, and in the margins of his report, a small note, found drawer with sealed envelope marked Kincaid. He opened it. Inside, a photograph. Black. White, slightly overexposed. It showed a man in a long coat, standing just outside the front door, looking directly at the camera. No smile, no movement, but the face wasn't entirely human. The eyes seemed too far apart, the mouth too still, and across the bottom of the photo, a typewritten caption, "For the next to enter." The envelope has since vanished. And today, no federal registry includes the Penrose estate. No documentation, no requests. No record that any inspection was ever performed. But every 7 years, always in autumn, a man in a dark suit has been reported standing at the gate, sometimes in the morning, sometimes at dusk. He never enters, he never speaks, but always his face looks just slightly wrong. And each time he leaves, the grass where he stood turns gray. Not dead, just changed. As if the soil beneath him had remembered something it wasn't supposed to, and the roots had chosen silence. Certainly, below is the complete cinematic horror narration script for Chapter 6, The Family That Didn't Move Out, written in the exact tone, rhythm, and structure of Liturgy of Fear. Word count is approximately 1,250. The table was set for 4, plates placed neatly, cutlery aligned, napkins folded, as if pressed with care. The toast was still in the rack, slightly curled at the corners, as though it had been buttered, then forgotten. And outside, the Holloway car remained in the drive, untouched, unmoved, still speckled with rain from the night before. On paper, the Holloways were ordinary. William, a surveyor from Albany, Mary, a former schoolteacher, and 2 children, Sarah, age 9, and Lucas, 11. They had moved into Penrose House in March of 1954. Spring had just broken the frost. The house had stood empty for nearly a decade, and for once there had been no incident, no cold spots, no strange visitors, no reports of reversed mirrors or footsteps overhead. Not at first. Letters sent to relatives were calm, ordinary. They mentioned long breakfasts, the smell of lilacs by the kitchen window, and the way the morning light made the stairwell glow. But by the 3rd month, something shifted. Mary stopped sending photographs. And in William's writing, his once ... tight script began to tremble, slanted too far right, too many ellipses, words trailing off mid ... nothing provable, just tone, just silence. Where there had once been rhythm. In July, a deliverman arrived with a parcel from Albany. He knocked. Waited. Knocked again. No answer. But he heard something from upstairs, a soft tapping in a repeating rhythm. He described it as fingertips drumming on glass. He circled the house, checked the side windows. Curtains were drawn, except one, the nursery, at the top of the stairs. He said there was a figure inside. Not moving, just pressed against the glass, too tall to be one of the children. When he called the local constable, no one responded for 6 hours. It was dismissed, filed as a mistake in paperwork. But something wasn't right. Because on the morning of October 2nd, a neighbor came by. She found the gate locked, but the front door was ajar. No signs of damage, no broken glass, no overturned furniture. The lights were off, but the smell of brewed coffee still lingered. The kitchen was warm. 2 eggs sat in a cold pan. The toast was still in the rack, the teacups half full. She called out. No answer. Upstairs, the beds were made, sheets tucked, pillows undisturbed, clothes folded at the foot of each bed. It was like they had never slept in them, but also like they had just gotten up. She tried the attic, then the cellar. Nothing. Everything was quiet, except the nursery door. It was warm. desk in William's study sat a journal, his handwriting, but rushed. The last 5 entries all written in the same ink, same pen. One of them read, Sarah said she heard someone in the walls again. Not mice. She says they whisper now. They want something beneath the stairs. Another, the mirrors are wrong. I don't see myself anymore. Mary won't look at hers. Lucas says he sees a second bed in the nursery. He's not lying. And the last line, unfished. Half a sentence. If we pretend to leave, maybe it won't fall. The ink trails off. No sign of struggle. No blood. No evidence of forced entry or exit. And the house was locked. From the inside, the car still full of their belongings. Suitcases in the hallway. Jackets on hooks. But the Holloways were gone. Authorities searched the house for 5 days. Canine units. Thermal scans. Ground. Penetrating. Radar. Nothing. No bodies. No traces of movement. Not even footprints in the dust that had settled in the attic. But something was found. Behind the walls of the parlor. A narrow crawlspace. Less than 2 feet wide. Candle stubs. Rusted nails. A broken child's shoe and scratched into the paneling. Don't say its name. It listens backwards. 4. The next decade, the house remained empty. No tenants. No buyers. And the nursery was sealed. The reports continued. Delivery drivers, mailmen, drifters, who took shelter during storms. All said the same thing. They heard movement upstairs. The smell of toast. And sometimes, just before dawn, laughter, soft, young, from behind a locked door. And today, if you visit the Penrose estate, you can still see the table. The plates are still there. The cups are empty now, but you can tell where the liquid once stained the porcelain and near the entryway. If you lift the old rug, there are faint scratches in the floorboards. Small, rhythmic like someone tapping from underneath as though the house remembered the Holloways, even if no one else did. And something never let them go. Of course. Here is the full cinematic narration script for Chapter 7. The basement that wasn't there, written in the tone, structure, and pacing of liturgy of fear. Room count is approximately 1250. It began with water, a thin line of light, curving from beneath. The pantry door, not quite a leak, not quite mold. Just dampness. In a house that had always been dry. It was April of 1962. The Penrose House had changed owners 3 times in less than 10 years. Each family left early, each for reasons that never made the paperwork. But the Stanleys had stayed longest. 9 months. Enough time to repaint the bedrooms, replant the hedges, and try not to ask questions. Until the floorboard near the kitchen bowed. Until the cat wouldn't go near the pantry. Until Mrs. Stanley noticed that the butter left on the shelf spoiled overnight. She called a contractor. 2 men arrived the following Monday. One older, the other young, barely 20. They opened the pantry. Found no plumbing, no warped plaster, but behind a shelf of canned peaches, a wall that ran hollow. They pried it open. It wasn't a wall. It was a door. A narrow wooden hedge, set low, just 3 feet tall, unpainted, no latch, no hinge. Just fitted into the frame, like it had always been part of the house. They opened it with a crowbar. Behind it, a stairwell, not in the blueprints, not in the inspection report, not mentioned in any of the deeds going back to 1904, but it was there. Stone walls, no light, and the smell wet limestone and something sweet, like rusted sugar. They descended. Each step was shallow, each one about the size of a man's shoe. And the stairs kept going. 12, 20, 1, 30, 3, 3, steps. Then nothing. The staircase ended in a flat concrete wall, unpainted, unadorned. Except at shoulder height, etched into the cement, were words. Prayers. Carved by hand. Latin, some in Greek, 1 line in Hebrew, incomplete, and 1 phrase repeated over and over in uneven gouges. Invertum gracie, invertum gracie. Undue grace, thought the young contractor. Laughed, thought it was a prank. He turned to leave, but the older man stood still. He said he felt something, not a draft, not air, a vibration not so faint it couldn't be heard, only felt through the boots, up the shin, into the ribs, a kind of humming dot. When they returned the next day, the pantry wall was sealed dot. No one knew who did it. The shelf of peaches was back, neatly aligned. No sign it had ever been moved, but the older contractor filed a report dot. It didn't go through. He called the county dot. No record of a stairwell. The Penrose House had no basement, no crawl space, no lower level dot. Only one floor and an attic dot. He went back, alone, but something wasn't right dot. He entered through the back, found the pantry shelf, tilted dot. He removed it again. The wall was there. The door still low, still fitted. He descended the stairs 40.3 again. He counted them, but this time there was no concrete wall, just more stairs, just more darkness. He said later, he turned around, tried to go back up dot, but couldn't, not because something stopped him, because the stairs were wrong. Each step he climbed, descended further. He panicked, dropped his flashlight, said he only made it out by keeping his hand on the right wall and never lifting his feet. When he surfaced, it was morning dot, but his watch said only 20 minutes had passed. He left his equipment behind, quit the job, moved to Rochester dot, and for the rest of his life, never went near another basement dot today. The pantry remained sealed dot. Contractors refused to work in the kitchen, and the stone steps, the 40.3, remain unaccounted for, but something new has appeared dot in the rain. On humid days, the floorboards just behind the pantry door rise slightly. They swell dot, and if you place your ear to the seam and listen long enough, you'll hear it. A sound like chanting, low, dry, almost mechanical, as if echoing from a mouth that's forgotten how to shape words dot. In 1994, a historian tried to reopen the stairwell. He brought students, cameras, an old blueprint. They found nothing, only shells, only dust. But when he developed his photographs, frame after frame showed the same thing. 40.3 stairs, descending out of light, ending in shadow, and one image was exposed, too dark to see anything clearly, except for the prayers, etched in concrete, almost glowing dot, and at the bottom right corner, handprint, but no one had touched the wall, and no one had descended that far. The professor burned the prints, left the university dot, and never spoke of the Penrose House again, but the photograph one remained. Someone kept a copy, and if you look closely in the grain, just behind the print of the hand, you could see the edge of something else, dot wall, not shadow, but a second hand, smaller, turned upward dot, as if it were reaching for yours dot. Certainly, here is the full cinematic narration script for Chapter 8, the priest who burned the house, but didn't, written in the calm, quietly horrifying tone of the liturgy of fear. Word count is approximately 125 dot at dusk. The trees along the Penrose property line seemed to lean away from the house. Not wind, not erosion, not just a slant settle, but persistent, as if the forest had long ago agreed never to face it directly down. It was the spring of 1971, and something in the house had begun to move again. The last caretakers had left the year before. No warning, no sale notice, just unpaid bills, and a row of rotting milk bottles on the porch. Now it was quiet for months, until the neighbors, those few who still lived nearby, began to report light from the third floor window. A soft pulse, rhythmic, like breath. Then the voices not shouting, not even speaking, but humming, low, deliberate, and well. On April 6th, Father Desmond Kale arrived, a local priest from Albany, quiet man, mid-50s, known for his sermons on cleansing spaces, not people. He hadn't been sent. He volunteered. He said he had dreamt of the Penrose House 3 nights in a row, each time the same. A staircase, a locked room, and pages burning without flame. The diocese didn't intervene. They told him to leave it alone, but he didn't. He arrived alone. Just before midnight, witnesses say he parked on the shoulder and walked the gravel path with nothing but a candle and a book. No flashlight, no water, just scripture. He stepped over the threshold without hesitation. The door didn't creak. It opened too easily. He was seen entering at 11:47 p.m., and at exactly 12:01, the lights appeared, not from the windows, but from the cracks, the seams between floorboards, the gap beneath the door. Even the mortar between bricks began to glow, faint at first, then pulsing, then blinding. The neighbors called the fire department, but no alarms were triggered. No smoke was seen from the roof, only the sound of a single bell, metallic, echoing like it was coming from inside the walls. And then the heat. 3 witnesses, standing 100 feet away, reported the air shifting. One said it felt like a furnace door opening. Another said her gums bled when she turned toward the attic window. By the time responders arrived, it had stopped. Everything. No glow, no sound, no smoke, just stillness, and a man lying on the lawn. It was Father Cale, blistered, hands blackened at the fingertips, clutching something against his chest. A Bible. Unburned. The leather binding was intact, the pages unscorched, but his fingerprints had sunk into the cover like wet wax. He wouldn't speak. Not that night, not the day after, not again. He was admitted to a psychiatric facility outside Troy, remained there until his death in 1989. For 18 years, he said only 5 words. It burns behind the book, repeated, sometimes whispered, sometimes screamed, until he stopped. Autopsy showed internal scarring lungs, throat, inner eyelids, consistent with smoke exposure. But his clothes were clean. No soot. No ash. And no fire had ever been documented inside the Penrose House. Except for one thing. The next morning, investigators found the eastern hallway, previously carpeted charred black. Only the outline of a single set of footprints remained, starting at the front door, ending at the base of the attic stair. Nowhere else. The attic door was locked, rusty, undisturbed, but something wasn't right. The hinges were melted, inward. As if the heat had come from the other side. No accelerants were detected, no faulty wiring, no evidence of arson. The report was filed, then lost. No one followed up. But a janitor at the facility where Cale had stayed, he kept the Bible. He said it HUMMED. Only in the early hours of the morning, only when the room was completely dark. He said he once opened it, and the first page had changed. Instead of Genesis, the opening line read, "In the beginning, it ended." He buried the book in a public park, changed jobs, moved south. The Bible was never recovered, but the attic door, it's still warm, even in winter, even when snow piles against the frame, and when visitors place a hand on the knob. They describe a sensation like holding a breath you didn't mean to take and being unable to release it. In 2004, a research group requested access to the attic. They were denied. The new owners, anonymous, refused all contact. But a photograph leaked. Just one, taken from beneath the attic steps, and in it, barely visible, in the shadows near the landing, a scorch mark, perfectly round, exactly the size of a candle base, and next to it, etched into the floorboard, ASHNDPR, ID. With no fingers, only flame, and below it, 2 words written backward, "Stay down." The photograph was taken before sunrise, pale light falling across cracked wood, 2 windows on the second floor, side by side, ivy growing between them, and then the door, where no door had existed days before, a plain panel, painted the same faded white as the siding, no handle, no keyhole, just a seam that fit too perfectly, no hinges visible, just the promise of something unknown dot in October of 1999. A group of amateur urban explorers, 4 of them, entered Penrose House with camcorders and floor plans. They measured, they recorded, they found 12 doors, 12 rooms, an attic, a basement that matched official records. Everything matched, or seemed to, until the next week. They returned to photograph again, to catalog artifacts, to map the house for others. That's when they found the door dot. It hadn't been painted, not freshly, but the wood was lighter, different grain. 2 new dot. They pushed on it, held their breath, but it didn't move. They tried to pry at one corner, heard nothing, but felt resistance. They tried the knob, but there was none. They pulled at the panel's edges, not fixed, just present. As though grown. One of them Callum knock. 3 slow knocks. Pause. 3 again. Silence. Then a sound, a soft exhale. From inside, they froze, but then pressed on. They found a latch hidden behind a loose plank, rusty, coated in dust. Turned it. The door swung inward on concealed hinges. They filmed inside. The staircase began where a wall should have been, narrow no wider than 2 feet. Stone steps, dusty, each one rising into darkness. They estimated 13 steps visible before the ceiling curved out. Then nothing, just black. They entered. Step by step, the air grew colder. Each breath a thin mist. At the 7th step, Callum paused. He looked up. No word. Just lifted his camera again. They heard it then. A scraping from above. Metal on metal. A lantern took flame in the range of their flashlight. There was no light fixture, no glass, just flame, floating or hovered. They couldn't tell, because it didn't move, but it glowed. Top of the stairs, just beyond reach. Callum climbed. 9, 10. He reached out, fingers trembling. 12. His foot touched the top. The lantern flickered and died. Callum screamed. Red light fading, and then nothing. They ran, stumbling through the door, down the hall, through the dining room, out into morning light. Door was closed behind them, seamless. They looked back. No panel visible, just wall, window, ivy. They reviewed footage. The film showed only their own backs, their breathing in the corridor. Then nothing. No screen, no staircase, no lantern. Just the camera recording dust motes, drifting in the corridor light. They returned with police. They pressed on walls with stud tools, tried to open plaster panels, searched for floor sketches, found nothing. The house inspector said it didn't exist, declared the property externally unchanged. The photographs from the explorers, he said, were inconsistent with recorded measurements. And then one picture stayed. A single frame captured the doorway, just the edges, just the shadow. But in the blackness beyond, behind where the stairs should have begun, something moved. A shape. Slowly. Pausing. Before retreating into the void. No faces, no eyes, just a suggestion. And the floor plan? A blank 13th room now here. Now gone. The explorers offered a statement. They entered, felt something, but refused further interviews. Each left the state within weeks. Callum moved to Seattle. He sent one postcard. On it, scrawled in blue ink, it watches what's in front of it. He never wrote again. Their footage was archived, locked behind legal requests. Unseen. Except for one still shot. It shows the top step, smooth stone, a single footprint, no others. And on that stone, a word carved. Enter. No signatures, no gates, just the command. The Penrose House stands silent today. No 13th door, no staircase. Just 2 windows and a wall. But some nights, nearby hikers swear they hear a knock, 3 slow taps, pause, 3 more, echoing from inside. And always from upstairs. Then fading into a breath. A single beam of sunlight fell across the nursery floor. Thin, precise. It landed on one spot, the seam between 2 boards, almost invisible. thin rectangle of wood, set flush with the floor dot. It resisted at first, dot then gave. Beneath, darkness.men in hard hats shone flashlights. They descended 3 steps, then 5, then 8. It was a small shaft, no wider than a coffin, and inside, almost at the bottom, they found bones, scattered, buried, just placed, fragile, small, child, no, skulls, no intact skeletons, just fragments, femur, rib, phalanges, the teen, paws, with someone flipped on the headlamp, and that's when he heard it, the tap, tiny, echoing off stone, descending through the hatch, into the corridor. Above, they climbed back out, sealed the hatch, told no one, except the site manager. Days later, a bone fragment was tested, lab results, human, juvenile, possibly multiple individuals. But before findings reached the press out, new entry arrived, a journal, bound in cracked leather, stamped on the cover, see Penrose, inside, were dozens of pages, small, neat handwriting, drawings, prayers, words, crossed out, in one entry, they watch from below. We built it for their sleep. Another. Tonight, I buried the first. He drew a floor plan, and under the nursery, an empty rectangle, labeled, sleeping place, pages later. All the other houses are wrong. Too tall, too full. They need it empty. At the back, no date, just the final page, pinned to the hatch's inner frame. A note, upside down, paralyzed in time, stamped into wood with a nail. We were never the first. Under it, a small smear of ash, no. Signature, no date, just silence. They closed the hole. Again, removed the journals, removed the bones, removed the house. But the note was left behind, secret, unseen, underneath the nursery floor. They packed the debris into tarps, hauling it away. But one worker saw a rib fragment slipping through the cracks between the boards, and in the dirt beneath the beams, tiny scratch marks, exactly 13, each about an inch long, parallel, 1. After another, moving toward the hatch, they left it there because no one could explain it or wanted to, in 2024. The lot is empty, just foundation rubble, quarter, inch gravel. But when the wind shifts, you can still hear it, a tapping from below. 13. Taps, slow, measured, waiting, for someone to lift the board again. The final narration reflects not on what the house is, but on why it keeps being entered. A meditation on human obsession with forbidden knowledge and how secrets aren't kept by places, but by people who choose to